Ferrari have been hiding a secret within their SF-24 this season. It's something that the Red Bull team first introduced at the beginning of this ground effect era in 2022 and have since been overtaken in this field by Ferrari as well as other teams in the grid. But what is it that this secretive device is and what's it doing? Well, it's an active suspension on the SF-24, and what it's doing is stalling the car and lowering it at a certain downforce level. Now, active suspension has been around in Formula 1 for decades, dating back to the 1983 season with the Lotus Type, and it was a subsequent years until the first Formula 1 car with active suspension actually won a race. Now, this was all banned in the 94 season for obvious reasons and was only seen again on the Mercedes W04, which was of course back then known quite well as the Frick suspension, which stood for front and rear interconnective suspension. But what does this have to do with Ferrari's trick suspension that they're running this season? Well, we'll be getting into that very shortly, but first I'm running a competition on the channel and you have the chance of winning this Ferrari Schedoni mid-90s leather goods. The winner will be announced this Friday, and all you have to do to be in with the chance is subscribe to the channel, like this video and comment down below. The winner will be announced Friday during FP1, so good luck to you. Now, when it comes to the suspension and active suspensions, each design is trying to achieve a different objective. So Frick suspension had its own objective. Active suspension in the mid-90s had its own. And it's the same case when it comes to this particular suspension that Red Bull first introduced in 2022 and Ferrari have now taken and improved upon even further this season. And while Mercedes' Frick suspension might have been all about controlling the front and rear suspension at certain corner speeds and throughout each corner phase, the Red Bull system first introduced in 2022 was simply about increasing the straight line speed advantage they had over their rivals. But Ferrari have taken it one step further this year, and the systems have now become much more sophisticated and allow the ground clearance at the rear of the car to be optimized in certain speed ranges. The increase in top line speed now is just one of several advantages. The effects of the trick Ferrari suspension are far more beneficial in other areas. So if you have mastered the technique correctly, you can adjust the chassis so that the rear is relatively high in slow and medium speed corners, giving you the freedom to absorb curbs and bumps to a greater degree. Now for the other end of the spectrum, and we come to fast speed corners, the ground clearance remains at a predetermined minimum height in order to achieve the optimum downforce for fast corners. So only when the load is maximum on the straights does the suspension lock up and the flow stalls. The levels at which the car are lowered and how far must be set before going out onto the track. And the technology required for this, of course, does have its kind of disadvantages in the fact that it weighs a few kilograms. But of course, the overall advantage gained from that certainly balances that out in the favour of lap time advantage, and Ferrari has perfected its chassis compared to that of last year's SF-23. As we've just said, no other car across the grid in 2024 absorbs bumps and curbs as well as the SF-24 does, and it's still competitive in fast corners. And the SF-24 certainly showcased that around the streets of Monte Carlo during the Monaco Grand Prix last time out, with Charles Leclerc finally winning his home race in Monaco. And, the car just looked fantastic throughout the entire three sectors of the track. It rode the curbs perfectly, it looked great in the somewhat medium speed corners around the track, and of course once you put it on pole, the ability to win and to control the race is literally in the palm of your hands. And of course with the Canadian Grand Prix coming up this weekend, which of course in itself has a lot of curb riding, a lot of slow speed corners, and a lot of medium speed corners as far as I'm concerned, I really expect Ferrari to kind of keep the advantage they've had over the last weekend. I think McLaren will actually be their rivals and the closest challengers to them And I think with Red Bull's current situation, with the simulation tools that they have kind of not given them the best base setup from which to start a Grand Prix weekend on, it can put them on the back foot and leave them having to kind of play catch up throughout the Grand Prix weekend instead of just fine tuning their RB20 to the track. And it's going to be one of the advantages Ferrari has. And what I like about this whole situation is, even as we're getting further and further into the race, into the season, we're finding out more and more design innovations from this Ferrari team and its current guys with Fred Vasseur at the helm. And finally, Ferrari seem to have the structure and the technical capabilities along with their star driver to be able to kind of mount a season-wide challenge to kind of basically go for the championships. And I think the Constructors' Championship certainly is up for grabs this year. Whether they have the updates in the pipeline to be able to sustain a challenge throughout the entirety of the season for the Drivers' Championship is still yet to be determined. But I would love to see that be the case. And of course, we can't forget the other factor which is going to be happening in 2025, and that's Lewis Hamilton is coming on board, and he's going to bring a wealth of experience and knowledge about how to win championships, something Ferrari have not done in a decade plus now. So I think the future is looking extremely bright for the team, and I think next year, even if this year doesn't go the way they would wish it to go, and they don't necessarily win all the championships or even one of them, I really think Ferrari will be on track to mount that challenge next year and hopefully finish the job and go over the finish line in first place. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see what other innovations the team could potentially come up with, whether they can actually improve upon this current suspension trickery that they've got going on, whether they can improve the overall efficiency of the, I would presume it would be called the SF-25 if they continue with their current trend. So I can't wait to see how this season unfolds, and of course next. Right guys, that's the video. I hope you've all enjoyed it. If you have, leave a like in the video of course for the competition, and I will catch you all in another video shortly.